Hey folks, Glyn here. I thought for this short video I'd give you a quick run through of everything that went into the retouching side of my recent Wolverine picture that I posted up on 500px. So what I want to do is just sort of go through the idea behind what the picture was, where it all came from, and then have a look through Photoshop's layers to show you everything that kind of went into making the picture. So this, as you can see in front of you now, if I just go to full screen, this was the final picture where we've got our Wolverine character overlooking the city of London. But the original idea came from a post that I'd seen posted up on the internet to do with the official Wolverine movie. So I thought it'd be really good as a personal project, which is something that I do a lot of personal projects, because it helps to sort of keep you motivated and also pushes you to learn new techniques. I thought it'd be good to do my own version of this picture here. So organised it, had a photo shoot with a guy called Glyn, who's also a photographer, Glyn Richardson, great photographer, and got Glyn into the studio, and Glyn had the look of the Hugh Jackman that we wanted. Absolutely, I mean, great physique, great rugged kind of look, exactly fitting the Hugh Jackman look. Now, the pose you can see him in now, not the most comfortable of poses, but the reason I took it at this particular angle was because you'll probably remember from just seeing that picture, the Wolverine is supposed to be up on a roof line. So if I was going to photograph him straight on, it just wouldn't have looked right. So I've basically put him onto this mini kind of like a step ladder so that Glyn was raised up just a little bit, so that when I was photographing it gave that impression of him being just a little bit higher than the camera anyway. But as for the lighting, you'll probably see in this video now, I've just used two lights. We had two of the Pro Photo heads, one on the left hand side behind Glyn, and that one there was the kind of like the main light. That was going to be the one that was going to give us this moonlight hitting Glyn's back. So the main priority when I was actually doing the photo shoot was to make sure that his back wasn't awash with light, but it was just hitting the top part of his back and just onto the top of his shoulders, and then no further round really, just so that later on in the actual picture that would represent where the moonlight was coming from. And then to the right hand side, which is into the front of Glyn now, we've got another Pro Photo head in a sort of medium rectangular softbox, just to add a little bit of fill so that we've got some detail coming up on the sword, on his hands, on his knees, and just a little bit on his face. But that wasn't the dominant light. The main light really was to get the one from the moonlight. Now, the pictures that make up this final image there, so this is the final sort of the one that I used of Glyn, the out of camera shot of Glyn. And then to get the remaining bits, so we needed like a ledge that he would be up on, like on a building line. So I went into London, met up with a friend of mine called Rajesh Taylor, another great photographer. I had a bit of a wander around, and I think not far from Leicester Square, I mean, my geography of London is awful, but I'm sure this wasn't far from Leicester Square. And this was just a flat brick wall that I kind of thought would look good, but obviously it was the wrong way around. So all I've done in Photoshop here is I've taken this photo, we've cut it out, and then I've just flipped it so that it's coming from the left hand side like it was in the final picture. And then obviously I needed the London Skyline shot, and managed to pull a few strings and get onto a building which was about 19 or 20 floors high to give us this kind of view here of London. Now, to take this shot, I used a Nikon 14-24, the f2.8 lens. Fabulous lens. I don't actually own the lens. I hired the lens from a company in the UK called Lenses for Hire, based in Maidenhead. I think I ended up taking 6 photos with it, but it was worth it for the final picture. But this is the shot. Perfect positioning for what I needed to make an iconic photo, if you like, of London, the London skyline. So you can see in the distance we've got St Paul's, we've got the London Eye, Big Ben, and then right in the distance, I actually forget the name of that now. That really, really tall cone-shaped building. My God, I forgot the name of it now. But that's what it was. But in the final picture, what I've done is I didn't actually use the background as a HDR, because this shot here was taken at something like, I think it was like 8 o'clock at night, so it was quite dark, but I didn't do it as a HDR. What I tend to do is I do my own manual HDR, if that makes sense. So what I'll do is I'll take a series of shots at different exposures, and then I'll just physically paint in parts I wanted. So I actually did try using Photomatics to see if this would work on this, but I wasn't really getting the results I wanted. But that isn't down to Photomatics, that's just down to my lack of experience of using the software, because I'm not really a HDR kind of guy. So this is the one shot that I used, and then there was one that was slightly underexposed that gave the detail on the clock of Big Ben, because at the moment you can see in this one here it's pretty blown out. So all I've done is literally put the underexposed picture over the top of this one, used a mask and painted in the detail of the clock itself. So that's the 3 pictures that have gone to make it up. Let's now flip over to Photoshop so you can actually see the layers that we've actually got. So that's obviously, like I say, that's the final image. Let's go down to the very, very bottom to see all the little steps that we went through. The first thing that I actually did was work on the background. So this is where we've got our out of camera picture, and you can see if I just zoom in onto Big Ben, you can see how I've painted in just where we've got the clock details, and you can actually see it's just after 8:15 in the evening. So that's the London skyline, but I needed more of a skyline to fit the Wolverine character into it, and also to give the impression of the London scene being lower down than what it was. So I've increased, basically I've just used the crop tool to add in this bit of empty canvas. And there's a video I've shown recently on my YouTube page where I've then filled in that empty canvas area using the auto blend layers in Photoshop. And you can check out that video on my YouTube page. It was one that was very, very recently added in. Now with the final picture here, this was the like I say, this was the skyline. What I found was, and again, somebody's bound to mail me and say, you should know what that building is, but I haven't got a clue what this is called here. My geography of London is awful. But this building down here I thought was just a little bit bright. So I've just added a 50% grey layer and just burned it down just so it wasn't quite so obvious. So you can see when I turn that on and off that it wasn't quite so bright, because obviously I didn't want my eyes to be drawn to that particular building. And then the next thing I've done is added a hue and saturation just to desaturate the whole picture a little bit. Now, I wanted to have it's going to be raining. Now, at the moment, the sky itself is pretty damn clear, so it wouldn't be the kind of sky you'd have when there's rain. If there's going to be rain, there's bound to be those rain clouds. So to add in the rain clouds, which are these ones here, this was really, really easy. It was just a case of adding a blank layer. In fact, I might just quickly show you that now. If I just show you, this is how I added the clouds in here. We add a blank layer, and we have to make sure that our foreground and background colour are set to their default. And you can do that by pressing D. So you've got the black and the white. And then you're going to go to Filter, Render and Clouds. And when you do that, you don't really get anything that looks like clouds, or certainly not the clouds that I'm used to seeing. So to make these look more cloudy, all you need to do is just get something like your rectangular marquee tool, make a selection in the middle, just a small selection, like so. And then put that onto its own layer by pressing Command or Control J. So now you can see, in fact I can throw that one away. All I've got now is this square here. And then all I'll do is just use my free transform and stretch it out. So now it does take on the kind of impression of more of clouds, and then you just lower the opacity down. So that was the kind of thing that I did for the clouds, and that was the effect there. So once I'd got the background prepped, it was then a case of bringing Glyn into the photo. And with Glyn, it was a case of there was a little bit of body shaping done, because anybody in that kind of crouch position there, they're going to get a little bit of a belly. Sorry, Glyn, but they are, no matter how good a condition you're in. But all I've done with Glyn there is I've just added, I've used topaz to get a little bit of detail out of his skin and the trousers, a little bit of dodging and burning as well to bring out some more of the creases, just a little bit of detail. And then obviously it's gone for a cutout as well. Now I actually put Glyn into the picture first, and then I put the legend afterwards. But there's a couple of things on Glyn that I want to show you that I did, because we've done a great, done a pretty damn good cutout, because Glyn was photographed, as you probably remember from seeing on that video, he was photographed, there wasn't even a backdrop there. I didn't put a backdrop up like a grey like I normally use. It was just the white walls of the studio, because all I wanted was just to have contrast between Glyn and the wall, or the background even. And that's when Photoshop can make cutting out a lot easier, or sorry, making cutting out a lot easier for Photoshop. So it's pretty easy to cut him out, but let's just turn off these effects here. What I've done is with the cutout of Glyn, I added a few layer styles, layer effects as well. So if I just zoom into his hair, you can probably see that there's a little bit of a halo, a little bit of that background coming in. But by using layer effects, or layer styles, sorry, we can actually get rid of that. So if I turn those on and turn them off, you can see that there. But also, because Glyn was going to be on a wall and it was night time, the moonlight was coming down from him. I didn't want the feet and the bottom of his jeans to be too bright.
So what I've done there is added a gradient overlay. So if I just turn that one on and off, hopefully you'll be able to see that. Let's just go, oh, wrong one, here we go. Let's just turn that off there. You can see just on his jeans, it's very subtle, but if you look at his boots and then the lower part of his jeans, how they go darker. And all that is a gradient overlay. And if I just double click on to bring that up, you can see in the layer styles here, got a gradient overlay and an inner glow. The inner glow gets rid of the kind of the bit of the background on his hair. So it actually makes it look as if, you know, the hair's in a perfect cutout. And the gradient overlay just used to darken down the bottom of Glyn, so his boots and his jeans. Okay, so the next thing, once Glyn was in the scene, it was a case of matching the colour. That was just a case of just creating a copy of the background using the average blur filter and blurring it, and then just applying that different colour to Glyn. All these kind of effects here, there's a few of my little videos that cover these kind of things. You might want to check out a video I've got called Taming Refine Edge, that's one of them. That shows a few of these little tips and tricks for getting cutouts. The background, that wall that we said that I photographed near Leicester Square, that's that one here. Literally just you cut out using the pen tool, which I love, the pen tool, absolutely love it. And again, some layer styles, layer effects are used to make it a little bit more in keeping with the whole environment, because you can see that's what it's like out of camera, and then a few effects have been added, so we've got like a gradient overlay and a bit of an inner glow as well, because the outside was just a little bit too bright. So those there, and there's a merge layer just there. Now the next thing, just working through the layer styles, these little plastic gloves, gloves, what I'm talking about, these plastic spikes. In fact, that was one thing that I did with Glyn. The spikes themselves, again, from that video, you may just quickly see it. There's like a pretend plastic hand that Glyn put his hand into that the spikes then came out of. And that plastic, it just wasn't realistic. So in Photoshop, it's just a case of cloning out the plastic hand so that Glyn's own hand was seen through. So that makes them look a bit more realistic, as if they are coming through Glyn's skin. But on the spikes themselves, just added some blood as well. Let's have a look. Where's the blood? There's the blood just there. And that is just a really simple technique there. Just getting a brush, getting quite a dark red, not a blood red. You'd actually go even darker than you want it. And then using the blend mode in the actual layer is set to overlay. So that'll make that colour of blood that you paint on just kind of wrap itself more realistically onto the spike, so it looks as if it was really there. So all the highlights and the shadows and everything come through the blood, so it looks like it's actually on the spikes themselves. Now then what I've done is I've gone for a black and white adjustment using Silver FX Pro by N.A.P.P software, and that is my go-to way of converting images to black and white. Generally what I do, it within the Silver FX Pro, there's a setting. In fact, let's just go to it now. We'll go Filter, N.A.P.P software, and Silver FX Pro 2. You've got loads of presets within Silver FX Pro 2, and I've got to be honest with you, the one that I use probably 99.9% of the times, there's one that's called High Structure Smooth. And I'll click on that, it'll give me like a good starting point, and then I'll come over to the right hand side where we have the brightness, the contrast and the structure controls. And for this picture I just boosted up the structure just a little bit, and I really like the effect that gives. It's almost like a kind of like clarity that we have within Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, but clarity on steroids. It really is an amazing bit of kit. I love it. So it really adds some punch to it. And then just working through, I've then began to add in the moonlight, and this moonlight now, it starts to make sense as to why I put in that backlight onto Glyn here, why his back was illuminated. Because if we didn't add in this moonlight now, I mean, most people would look at the picture and go, so where is that light on his back coming from? So I think it's important that once you've actually lit the picture, well, say it's important, it's one thing that I like to do, is to add into the picture the light source that kind of represents where those highlights are coming from. So it kind of makes sense to the layperson when they're looking at it, going, oh right, everything seems to sort of like slot into place. That we know that light there is obviously coming from a moonlight up here. And incidentally, to add that moonlight there is so simple. All it was a case of adding a blank layer, getting a brush, a nice soft brush at 100% opacity, and putting a dab into it, and then changing the blend mode to overlay. Now overlay was used because it kind of maps in to the shadows there, and blend modes are just a fantastic kit. If you haven't played around with blend modes, I definitely recommend you do that. The great thing is it interacts now with the clouds we've got. So as I kind of increase it, I can use free transform to increase the size of the moonlight there, and then just drag it out. But the great thing is it actually does look as if the light from the moon is coming through the shadows, like it, sorry, the clouds, like it really would do. So blend modes, absolutely fantastic, love them. Okay, so walking through then, the next thing was I knew that I was going to be adding in some rain to it. So obviously into the picture, things needed to look, well, like they were a little bit wet. So how on earth do you do that? Well, I used, if we look at the ledge here, if I just turn that layer on and off, it kind of gives it a little bit of a wet look there. And all that is there is within the filter gallery. When you go to filter and you got filter gallery, one of the ones within there is called plastic wrap. So all I did was I made a selection again of this ledge and applied the plastic wrap and just played around with the settings, applied the plastic wrap to the whole of the actual ledge. And then all of the, if I can see that by just turning off the, there you go. So that's the plastic wrap applied to all of it. Obviously way too much, but it does give that wet look to it. So then all I've done is I've added a black layer mask to hide the effect and just painted in just little bits of it around about different opacities, so like 50 or 60% opacity in just certain areas. So it looked as if there was a little bit of wet patches all over that ledge, like there would be if it was raining. And of course, if the ledge is wet, then Glyn would need to be wet as well, because it's no point putting in this rain if it doesn't look like it's raining on Glyn. So same thing on Glyn, added a bit of that plastic wrap onto Glyn as well, but only a little bit onto the highlights. And this is, it's like what Joel Grimes says, you've got to sell the fake so that it looks as realistic as possible to get away with it and to sell the fake. But here's me saying you've got to sell the fake. We've got a guy here with spikes growing out of his hand, so whether it looks realistic or not is neither here nor there. But you know what I mean, it's more a case of just adding in some kind of wet look onto his skin there, and that works really well. So that's plastic wrap within the filter gallery. The next thing was I just worked on his back, and that was just a case of adding in some highlights on there. I think I used a blend mode of screen, so created a few copies of the actual highlights and used a blend mode of screen. That was really easy to do. And then the rain splashes. Now this is probably the bit that took the longest to do. So if we just look at the rain and the splashes area here, that's with the whole effect applied on, and that's with it off. So let's just open it up now, and we'll turn off each individual one. So the first one was adding in the rain. Now there's so many ways that we can add rain in Photoshop. We can use noise, apply noise to a 50% grey layer, then use motion blur, all kinds of different settings. There's also within Photoshop, which only recently kind of discovered this, from a friend of mine, Calvin Hollywood, showed us that within layer styles, in fact I think it was Olaf Gearman who discovered this. He's a guy who dives so far into Photoshop and finds all these hidden treasures. So within Photoshop here we've got window and we've got styles. And the drop down menu on styles here, one of them says image effects, and when you use that at the very bottom, you'll have one, if I hover my cursor over it, one that's called rain, which is this one here. And when you apply that, when you click on it, it adds quite a realistic rain effect. But you don't just use it as a one-click fix to adding in rain. You can play around with it and just make it a little bit more realistic. So all I did with that was I added in the rain using that layer style and then made a selection and then added in more, but made it bigger, if that makes sense. So I've applied the layer style, made a selection in the middle, like I did with the clouds, put that onto its own layer, then increase the size of it. And that just gives depth to the rain, as if rather than having the rain on one kind of area within the picture, by making a selection and increasing the size of it, that kind of gives the impression of the rain being closer to the camera. I hope that makes sense. But if I just turn the two rain layers off, this is the effect that's with the layer style, that style that you can use within Photoshop. So it's pretty damn good, looks really effective. And then all I've done is made a selection of the middle bit, put it onto its own layer and increase the size of it like I did with the clouds, to then give the impression of rain being closer to the camera. So that's that one there. Hope that explains that well. Now the next thing was adding rain onto our subject here, our Glyn. And that was really, if you just zoom in, we can see that it's proper rain splashes here, probably splashes of water hitting his back. And all that is just lots and lots of copies of, I've got a glass with a black background full of water and just dropping an object into the water so you get the splashes and taking a photo of it. So it's just a simple case of just using those splashes all over Glyn. So that's why there's lots of them. You can probably see, let's just open up that layer there, the rain splashes, you can see all the way down here are all those splashes because they're really small. So it's a case of adding in different ones, flipping them round, masking bits out so that all the splashes weren't identical. So that's the rain splashes, and then just done exactly the same thing on the floor to add some splashes in onto the floor, and also one where the sword is hitting the ledge. So you can see that just there. Now that was the main picture. I kind of got to that point there. That probably took, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours or so, I guess. And then what I'll generally do at that stage is walk away from it. And that's something that I talk about a lot when I'm doing retouching. Something that I call being pixel blind, where you can do so much that your eyes start to play tricks with you and you can't really see exactly what it is that you've done. So at that stage, save what you've done, walk away from it. Now, you could go and have a cup of coffee or come back, or even just come back the next day. But do that so that when you do come back to the picture, you're looking at it with fresh eyes and you can see what, if anything else, you need to do. So I call this bit now, once I've done the whole composite, I know that everything's pretty much there. All I want to do now is add the finishing touches, and that's the colour and all that kind of stuff. And I call that playtime. So what I'll do is I'll create a merge layer at the top of my layer stack, and then I'll start playing around with plugins, because up until this point, I haven't really made use of plugins all that much. I've used the Topaz when I was working on Glyn, and I've used Silver Effects Pro to do that desaturated black and white. But now we're at the end of the actual retouch. This is when I really do start using plugins. Now the plugins I love to use is the N.A.P.P Color Effects Pro 4. I absolutely love that. There's so much within there. And Topaz Adjust. So I'll play around with those to see what effects I can get. But having mucked around with those and using cross-processing, and there's one called Photo Stylizer, I think it is, within N.A.P.P Color Effects Pro 4. Eventually I've come up with a look that I was happy with, and I went for this kind of blue-toned picture, because obviously this is night time, to give the idea of being at night. So that's pretty much it. That was all the layers there. Yeah, I would guess probably if you take away all the breaks in between it, maybe 2 or 3 hours bit of retouch in there. But a lot of fun. Great fun to actually reverse engineer a picture that I'd originally seen, that one off the internet, to then work out how I would do certain things like the splashes. So doing personal projects like this is a great way to learn, and a lot of fun as well. So what else can I tell you? Right, all I'd like to say is the picture here, the one we've just done, the Wolverine picture. If you want to see it in a higher resolution, a larger version, just visit my 500px portfolio page. That's this one here, and you can access that via my website, which is all the W's and then glindewis.com. So I hope that's been useful. If you'd like to see more of these kind of walkthroughs, if you like, of layers and all that kind of stuff that's been done, then just drop me a note on the bottom here under the comments section, and yeah, we'll look at doing more of those. But in the meantime, have a good one, and I'll see you soon.